How many footsteps does it take for a shadow to reach the edge of your bed? Some say 7, others say fewer, if you're careless. But all agree, each step is earned, each step is a warning, and when the 7th falls, you are never seen again. In a quiet town, where the houses huddle together as if for comfort, there stands an old house with peeling paint and windows that stare blankly at the street. Locals say the house is cursed, though no one remembers why. Some avoid walking past it after sunset. Others cross themselves without knowing it. But for the Turner family, who moved in one autumn evening, the house was simply a bargain, a chance to start over, to build something new within old walls. The first night was uneventful. Boxes stacked in corners, laughter echoing in empty rooms, the scent of fresh paint and hope. But as the clock chimed midnight, a coldness crept through the halls, subtle at first, then biting. In the smallest bedroom, their daughter Lucy lay awake, listening to the wind rattle the windows. She heard a soft sound, almost like a sigh, and then a whisper that seemed to come from the darkness beneath her bed. Don't leave your closet door open at night. It was a simple rule, odd but harmless. Lucy, half asleep, reached out and closed the door. The whisper faded. She drifted into uneasy dreams. The next morning, she mentioned it at breakfast. Her parents smiled, dismissing it as imagination. But that night, as she lay in bed, the whisper returned. Don't sleep with your feet uncovered. Lucy obeyed, tucking the blanket tightly around her toes. The room felt colder, the shadows longer. She wondered if she should tell her parents again, but something in the whisper made her hesitate. On the 3rd night, Lucy forgot. She left the closet door ajar, distracted by a book, as she drifted off. The air grew thick, heavy with silence. From the far corner of her room, she heard a sound, slow, deliberate step. The floor creaked, and the shadow in the corner seemed to stretch, reaching closer to her bed. Locals say the house keeps its own rules, old as the bones of the earth. Break them, and the shadow takes a step. 7 steps is all it needs. Lucy woke with a start, heart pounding. The closet door stood open, the shadow in the corner darker than before. She closed the door, whispering an apology into the dark, but the sense of unease lingered, a weight pressing down on her chest. Each night, the rules changed. Don't let the mirror face your bed. Don't sleep with your window open. Don't look under the bed after midnight. Some rules were easy to follow. Others slipped her mind in the haze of sleep. Each time she forgot, she heard it, the slow, unmistakable sound of a footstep, the shadow inching closer. By the 5th night, Lucy counted 3 steps. The shadow now reached the middle of her room, thick and shapeless, but undeniably watching. She told her parents, her voice trembling. They searched the room, found nothing, and reassured her with gentle words. But that night, as the clock struck 12, the whisper returned softer, colder. Don't speak its name. Lucy didn't know the name, but the urge to ask, to challenge the darkness, grew stronger. She bit her tongue, repeating the rules in her mind like a prayer. Still, sleep was hard to find. When it came, it brought dreams of footsteps echoing down endless halls, of shadows stretching across the floor. On the 6th night, she forgot to turn her nightlight on. The darkness pressed in, thick as velvet. She heard the step before she saw it, the shadow now just an arm's length from her bed. It seemed to pulse and breathe, a living thing made of midnight and fear. Some say the shadow is patient, that it waits for the moment you forget, the moment you slip. Others claim it feeds on doubt, growing stronger with each broken rule. Lucy could feel its hunger, its anticipation. She clung to the rules, desperate to keep the 7th step at bay. The final night came with a storm. Rain lashed the windows, thunder shook the house. Lucy lay awake, reciting the rules, checking the closet, the mirror, the window. But exhaustion won, dragging her into a restless sleep. She dreamed of the shadow, now towering over her bed. It whispered her name, a sound like wind through dead leaves. She tried to scream, but her voice was lost. The shadow raised a hand, and she saw, for the first time, a face empty, hollow eyes like pits of darkness. She woke to silence. The storm had passed, but the room was colder than ever. She looked to the corner. The shadow was gone. Her parents found her the next morning, pale and silent, unable to speak of what happened. She moved through the house like a ghost, always glancing at corners, at closets, at mirrors. The rules never left her mind. Rumors claim the house still stands, waiting for new tenants, new footsteps, new rules to be broken. Locals say if you listen closely at night, you can hear the creak of the seventh step echoing through empty halls, and somewhere, in the darkness beneath a child's bed, a shadow waits, counting softly, always ready to begin again. Night after night, the nightmares come vivid, relentless, leaving you gasping in the dark. You dread sleep, knowing what waits behind your closed eyes. Teeth, claws, falling, endless running. Voices that know your fears. One night, as you lie awake, a shadow slides across your wall darker than the others. Moving with purpose, it pauses at the foot of your bed, stretching, thickening, until it almost seems to have a face. A voice, soft as smoke, curls into your ear. I can end your nightmares. All I ask is a secret. You hesitate, and the shadow leans closer, its edges flickering like candlelight in a draft. Any secret will do, but you must follow the rules. You ask, what are the rules? The shadow's grin is felt, not seen. The rules are simple, but they change. You'll know when you break one. Desperate, you whisper a secret one you've never told anyone. The shadow drinks it in, and that night, your sleep is dreamless and deep. But the next night, the shadow returns. Another nightmare, another secret. You comply, but this time, you wake with a strange taste in your mouth, and the memory of the secret feels faded, as if it no longer belongs to you. Soon, you notice the shadow's rules are never the same. One night, do not speak your secret aloud. Another, do not think of the secret after you give it. Another, tell the secret to someone else, or the nightmare returns. Sometimes, the shadow asks for secrets you don't want to give. Tell me a secret about someone you love. Tell me a secret you promised never to share. You try to refuse, but the nightmares come back, worse than before, and the shadow always waits, patient, offering relief for a price. Soon, you struggle to remember what's yours, your memories, your promises, your truths. The shadow's rules twist and tighten, always shifting, always unclear. You realize too late, the shadow isn't just taking your nightmares, it's taking pieces of you. And when you have no secrets left, the shadow leans in, grinning wide, and whispers a final rule. Now, you must collect secrets for me. In the morning, you wake with a hunger for whispers, for confessions, for the darkness in other people's hearts. You are no longer alone in your bed for now. You are the shadow, and the bargain continues. When Jamie started college, she knew dorm life would be an adjustment. Late nights, shared bathrooms, awkward introductions. She didn't expect terror. Her new roommate, Mara, was quiet, almost painfully so. She rarely spoke, never smiled, and her eyes seemed to flicker in the lamplight. But the strangest thing was that Mara never slept. Jamie would wake at 2 or 3 in the morning, groggy and thirsty, and see Mara sitting on her bed, perfectly still, staring at the ceiling, or the door. Sometimes, Jamie thought Mara was watching her, but whenever she looked directly, Mara's gaze was elsewhere. The sleep paralysis began a week after Marvin. Jamie would wake in the dead of night, unable to move, a crushing weight on her chest. Shadows pressed in at the edges of her vision, thick, and suffocating. She could see Mara sitting upright on her bed, eyes wide and unblinking, her lips moving in a silent chant. No matter how Jamie struggled, she couldn't call out. The room felt colder, the darkness deeper. Sometimes, in the corner of her eye, she saw shapes crawling along the walls, thin, spidery things that vanished when she blinked. When she finally broke free, gasping and sweating, Mara would be in the same position as before, staring blankly at the door. Jamie tried to talk to Mara about it. "Do you ever have trouble sleeping?" she ventured one morning. Mara just shook her head, her mouth twisting in a knowing smile. "I don't sleep." That was all she said. The episodes grew worse. Jamie dreaded the night, dreaded the moment when her body would betray her and the paralysis would set in. Each time, Mara was awake, always watching. One night, Jamie managed to move her eyes enough to look at Mara's face during the paralysis. Mara's eyes were black, pupils swallowing every trace of color. Her mouth moved faster, whispering words Jamie couldn't hear. A shadow rose from Mara's bed, stretching across the floor, reaching for Jamie's frozen form. Jamie squeezed her, eyes shut, praying for morning. When she awoke, Mara was gone. Only a cold indentation remained on the sheets. But that night, and every night after, the paralysis returned. The shadow still came, and Jamie could feel Mara's presence lingering in the room. Silent and sleepless, she tried to move out, tried to switch dorms, but something always stopped. Her paperwork lost, emails unanswered, doors locked when they shouldn't be. She was trapped. Now, Jamie keeps her eyes shut tight when she feels the paralysis begin. She never looks at the empty bed across from hers. She never listens for the soft, whispering voice. Because Mara is still there, somewhere in the shadows, waiting for Jamie to open her eyes. And Jamie knows. Some roommates never really leave. Some nightmares are wide awake. What if the darkness is not empty? What if, in the hush of your bedroom, something waits silent, unseen, reaching for you as you drift between waking and sleep? Some call it a nightmare, others, a trick of the mind. But there are those who know better. In a narrow house at the end of Willow Street, where the wind rattles the windows and the shadows gather thick in the corners, lived a young woman named Clara. She had always been careful, ever since she was a child. Careful with her words, careful with her steps, and, most of all, careful with her bedtime ritual. Each night, as the moon rose and the world outside faded into silence, Clara moved through her routine. She would lock the door with a gentle click. She would draw the curtains, making sure no sliver of moonlight crept in. She would place her slippers side by side at the foot of her bed, never touching, never askew. She would smooth the sheets 3 times. Always 3, never more, never less. And finally, she would whisper a short prayer, her voice barely more than a breath. Only then would she slip beneath the covers, heart steady, eyes heavy with sleep. For as long as she could remember, Clara had felt the weight of something, watching. Not every night, not always, but often enough that the ritual became her shield, a way to keep the darkness at bay. It began when she was young, a whisper in the night, a pressure on her chest, a sense of being held down, unable to move, unable to scream. Her mother would come running, gentle hands shaking her awake. But Clara could never find the words to explain, so she learned to protect herself, to follow the steps, each one a barrier between her and the thing that waited in the shadows. Years passed. Clara grew older, but the feeling never left. The ritual became second nature, as much a part of her as breathing. Friends laughed at her careful ways, but she did not mind. She knew what waited if she faltered. One night, as autumn leaves scraped against the window and the air turned sharp with cold, Clara returned home late. The city was restless, the streets alive with distant sirens and the hum of traffic. She hurried up the steps, her heart pounding, the keys cold in her hand. Inside, the house was quiet, shadows stretching long across the floor. She glanced at the clock, midnight. She moved quickly, her body remembering the steps, even as her mind raced. Lock the door, draw the curtains, place the slippers, smooth the sheets, whisper the prayer. But as she reached for the covers, she realized she had forgotten to smooth the sheets. Her breath caught. She froze, staring at the rumpled fabric. A chill crept up her spine. She tried to tell herself it was nothing, just a slip, a harmless mistake. But the room felt different, heavier, closer. She smoothed the sheets, once, twice, 3 times. But it was too late. The ritual had been broken. Clara climbed into bed, pulling the covers to her chin. She lay in the darkness, listening to the wind outside, the creak of the house settling. Her eyes drifted closed. But sleep did not come. Instead, a pressure settled on her chest, light at first, like the weight of a cat, then heavier, stronger. She tried to move, but her arms would not obey. Her legs were pinned, as if invisible hands pressed them into the mattress. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She tried to scream, but her voice was trapped. In her throat, the darkness pressed closer. She could feel the hands now, cold and firm, holding her down, fingers curled around her wrists, her ankles, her throat. She fought to move, to break free, but the grip tightened. A whisper filled the room, soft and sibilant. "You forgot." The words slid through the darkness, curling around her like smoke. "You broke the pattern." Clara's mind raced. She tried to remember the steps, to retrace her actions. Lock the door, draw the curtains, place the slippers, smooth the sheets, whisper the prayer. Had she missed anything else? Had she left a window open, a light on, a slipper out of place? The hands squeezed tighter, her vision blurred. The darkness seemed to pulse, alive and hungry. She forced herself to focus, to remember the prayer. Her lips moved, soundless, forming the words she had whispered every night. Slowly, the pressure eased, the hands loosened, the darkness receded. Clara gasped, her body jerking awake. The room was silent. The wind had died. The shadows lay still. She sat up, heart racing, sweat cold on her skin. She looked around, searching for any sign of the thing that had held her, but the room was empty from that night on. Clara's ritual became even more precise. Every step, every motion, measured and careful. She added new rules, checking the windows twice, turning the clock to face the wall, placing a glass of water on the nightstand. Each addition a new layer of protection, a new barrier against the unseen hands. Some nights, the pressure returned, a reminder, a warning. But as long as she followed the ritual, the hands remained at the edge of her awareness, waiting but never touching. Friends still laughed. They called her superstitious, obsessive, but Clara did not care. She knew what waited in the darkness. She knew the price of forgetting. And so, each night, as the world outside faded and the shadows gathered, Clara moved through her ritual step by step, word by word, a dance with the darkness, a bargain with the unseen. For in the silence of the night, the hands are always waiting, and only those who remember the ritual can hope to keep them at bay. But sometimes, all it takes is one forgotten step, one broken pattern, and the darkness will reach out once more, and somewhere, in another quiet house, a restless soul wonders if tonight will be the night the hands return. They say the hour between 3 and 4 in the morning belongs to shadows. Some call it the devil's hour, others the witching hour. But in the quiet town where Daniel lived, locals whispered of something else, a visitor who arrived at exactly 3:03 a.m., bearing rules that must never be broken. The house was silent, save for the ticking of an old clock in the hallway. Night pressed against the windows, thick and absolute. Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The faint glow of his alarm clock painting red numbers on the darkness. 3:01. He listened to the wind outside, the creak of settling wood, the distant hum of a refrigerator. Night after night, sleep eluded him, as if something in the air itself warned him to stay awake. Tonight, a heaviness crept into the room. It began as a subtle pressure on his chest, growing stronger with each passing second. His arms grew leaden, his legs refused to move. He tried to call out, but his voice was lost somewhere between his mind and his lips. Panic flared, cold and sharp. As his eyes darted around the room for any sign of movement, the clock ticked over. 3:02. The air grew colder, the silence deeper. Daniel's breath came in shallow gasps. Shadows gathered in the far corner, swirling, thickening, until they seemed to pulse with a life of their own. He could not move. He could only watch. Then, as the clock changed to 3:03, the shadow detached itself from the darkness. It elongated, stretched, and took form a figure, impossibly tall and thin, its face obscured by a shifting haze. The room seemed to shrink around it. Daniel felt its gaze, though it had no eyes, and a chill worse than winter crept through his bones. The visitor stood at the foot of his bed. It did not speak with a voice, but with a presence that filled the room, pressing against Daniel's thoughts. "Don't blink." The command echoed in his mind, as clear as if it had been whispered into his ear. Daniel's eyes burned. Tears welled up, threatening to spill. He fought the urge to close them, to squeeze them shut against the terror before him. The visitor waited, silent and patient, as if it had all the time in the world. Outside, the wind rattled the window pane. Inside, time stretched. Seconds became minutes. The visitor remained, unmoving, until the first blush of dawn crept along the horizon. As morning light seeped into the room, the shadow faded, dissolving into the ordinary darkness beneath the bed. Daniel's limbs came alive. He gasped, clutching his chest, eyes wide and stinging. The rule echoed in his mind. "Don't blink," he wrote, it down on a scrap of paper, hands trembling, afraid to forget. Sleep came more easily the next night, not from comfort, but from exhaustion. Daniel's body ached with fatigue, but his mind whirled with dread. Still, when the clock neared 3, he found himself awake, staring at the glowing numbers. 2:59, 3 o'clock. He waited, heart pounding, for the heaviness to return. It came as before, slow and inescapable. His body froze. The room darkened at the edges, shadows thickening in the corners. The clock's red digits flickered. 3:03. The visitor emerged, as inevitable as the tide. Tonight, it stood closer, its presence filling the room with icy dread. "Don't look at my face." The words slid into Daniel's mind, cold and absolute. He fixed his gaze on the ceiling, refusing to look down, even as he felt the visitor's gaze pressing against him. The urge to look was overwhelming, a compulsion that gnawed at his will. But he remembered the rule. He clung to it, repeating it, silently, until the visitor faded with the coming dawn. He added the new rule to his list, his handwriting shaky and uneven. Each night, the pattern repeated. The clock would tick toward 3:03, and the heaviness would return. Pinning Daniel in place, the visitor would emerge, always from the same corner, always with a new rule. Count backward from 100. Don't let your feet leave the bed. Never speak. The rules grew stranger, more personal. Daniel's world shrank to the size of his bedroom. He lived by the rules, afraid of what would happen if he failed. He stopped seeing friends, stopped leaving the house after dark. His life became a series of rituals, each designed to keep the visitor at bay. He kept a notebook on his nightstand, filled with rules written in shaky script. Each morning, he would review them, memorizing every word. He became obsessed, haunted by the fear of forgetting. One night, Daniel blinked. It was only for a moment, a reflex against the burning in his eyes. But it was enough. The visitor's head snapped toward him, its form flickering with sudden energy. The room filled with a suffocating silence, so dense it seemed to press the air from his lungs. Long, cold fingers wrapped around his wrists, squeezing until pain shot through his arms. Daniel's mind screamed, but his mouth remained silent. He woke with bruises, dark and finger-shaped, circling his wrists. Rumors claimed those who break the rules never truly recover. Daniel believed it. The fear never left him, even in daylight. The visitor's rules changed after that. They became less about survival, more about memory. Don't forget. Remember what you did. Daniel's mind twisted under the weight of old regrets. Memories, surfaced childhood mistakes, broken promises. Words he wished he could take back. The visitor seemed to know everything, whispering his worst fears into the darkness. Each night, Daniel confronted another memory, another secret he had tried to bury. The rules were no longer just about making it to morning. They were about atonement. Daniel tried everything to escape. He changed his sleeping schedule, drank coffee late into the night, filled his room with light and noise. He tried sleeping in different rooms, even on the floor, but the visitor always found him, always at 3:03. He covered the clock, but he still knew the hour. He tried sleeping with the lights on, but the shadows only grew deeper. He considered moving, but something told him the visitor would follow. Sleep became a battleground. Each night, Daniel fought to stay awake, but exhaustion always won. He dreaded the moment when his limbs would grow heavy, when the visitor would appear. On the 7th night, the visitor stood beside the bed, closer than ever before. Its form was clearer now, less a shadow and more a presence. Its mouth opened, but no sound came. The clock glowed, 3:03. Daniel waited, reciting the rules in his mind. He expected a new command, a new challenge. Instead, the visitor reached out, pressing a cold hand to his chest. "Don't forget," it whispered, the words echoing through his mind. A memory surfaced, sharp and vivid, a childhood friend, a broken promise, a moment of betrayal. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as the guilt washed over him. The visitor watched, silent and unmoving. The clock ticked forward, 3:04. The visitor faded, leaving Daniel alone in the cold, silent room. Daniel never saw the visitor again, but he lived by the rules, just in case. He kept the notebook by his bed, a warning to himself and to anyone who might find it. He never forgot the lessons the visitor had taught him. Locals say the visitor comes for those who need to remember, for those with secrets too heavy to bear. Some say the rules are different for everyone, but the visitor always comes back. And somewhere, as the clock strikes 3:03, a new shadow stirs, waiting to whisper its rules to the next restless soul. You're listening to Nocturnal Narrative Studio. If these haunting stories filled you with fear, kindly share your own frightening experiences in the comments section below. Keep your eyes peeled for our upcoming episode, where we have even more fearsome and spine-tingling tales planned for you. Have you ever woken from a dream so vivid that reality seemed pale in comparison? Or found yourself in a moment so surreal that you questioned whether you were truly awake? What if the boundary between dreams and waking life wasn't just thin, but non-existent? And what if crossing that boundary came with rules that, if broken, could cost you everything? Alex Mercer couldn't remember when the dreams began. They seemed to have always been there, lurking at the edges of consciousness, waiting for the moment sleep claimed the mind to unfurl their strange landscapes and impossible physics. What Alex did remember was the first time a dream bled into waking life. It happened on a Tuesday morning, unremarkable in every way, until the moment Alex reached for the coffee mug on the kitchen counter. The mug, plain white ceramic, chipped slightly at the rim, was exactly where it should have been. But as fingers closed around the handle, the mug shimmered, its edges blurring like watercolor paint spreading on wet paper. And then it wasn't a mug at all, but a small bird, white-feathered and delicate, that took flight from Alex's startled hand and circled the kitchen once before dissolving into motes of light that rained down like dust motes in sunlight. Alex blinked, heart racing. When eyes focused again, the mug sat innocently on the counter, solid and unchanged. "I'm still dreaming," Alex whispered to the empty kitchen. "That's all, just dreaming." But the incident wasn't isolated. Over the following weeks, reality began to fray at the edges. Objects would transform momentarily, a pen becoming a slender silver fish that wriggled between fingers, a doorknob flowering into a brass rose before returning to its original form. Sometimes the sky would ripple like the surface of a pond, disturbed by a thrown stone. Once, for a heart-stopping moment, gravity simply ceased, and Alex found themselves floating 6 inches above the bedroom floor before crashing back down. Each episode lasted only seconds, but they were increasing in frequency and duration, and each time, Alex was left wondering the same thing: am I awake, or is this all a dream? Sleep became a feared enemy rather than a refuge. In dreams, the strangeness was expected, almost comforting in its familiarity. But these waking hallucinations, that's what they were, carried a sense of wrongness that left Alex cold with dread. "Hypnagogic hallucinations," said Dr. Patel, her voice calm and clinical as she made notes on her tablet. "Essentially, your brain is mixing dream elements into your waking perception. It's uncommon but not unheard of, often associated with narcolepsy or sleep deprivation." Alex shifted uncomfortably in the chair. "But I'm not falling asleep when these happen. I'm fully awake. The brain is complex," Dr. Patel replied with a small smile. "What feels like full wakefulness to you might actually be a state between sleeping and waking. Let's run some tests, see if we can identify any underlying issues." The tests found nothing. Brain scans, sleep studies, blood work all normal. Dr. Patel prescribed a mild sedative to help regulate sleep patterns and suggested keeping a journal of the episodes. "Record everything," she advised. "When they happen, what you experience, what you were doing right before. Patterns might emerge that could help us understand what's triggering these events." The journal quickly filled with entries, each more disturbing than the last. Tuesday, 3:14 p.m., walking home from work. Shadows began moving independently of their casters. One shadow cast by a mailbox reached out and touched my ankle. Felt cold, like being brushed with ice water. Duration, approximately 12 seconds. Friday, 7:22 a.m., brushing teeth. Reflection in mirror stopped mimicking my movements. It placed its finger to its lips, as if telling me to be quiet. When I dropped my toothbrush in shock, reflection returned to normal. Duration, 5 seconds. Sunday, 11:47 p.m., to lying in bed. Ceiling began to lower, slowly toward me. Could feel pressure increasing as it descended. Just before it would have crushed me, it snapped back to normal position. Duration, 20 seconds. And then came the night that changed everything. Alex Wokor seemed to wake to find a figure sitting at the foot of the bed. Human in shape, but wrong, somehow. Its proportions slightly off, its movements too fluid. It wore what appeared to be a suit made of shifting shadows, and where its face should have been was only a smooth, featureless expanse. Alex tried to scream, but found no voice. Tried to move, but found no control over leaden limbs. The figure tilted its head, a gesture somehow conveying curiosity, despite its lack of features. When it spoke, its voice seemed to bypass ears entirely, manifesting directly in Alex's mind. "You're crossing over too frequently," it said, the words carrying a texture like velvet, dragged across stone. The boundaries weren't meant to be this permeable. Alex managed to force out a whisper. What boundaries? Between here and there, between dreaming and waking. The figure gestured, and the bedroom around them rippled like a reflection in disturbed water. You're tearing holes in the fabric. I don't understand. The figure leaned closer, and though it had no eyes, Alex felt the weight of its gaze. Most people live their entire lives in one realm or the other, crossing only during the natural cycles of sleep and wakefulness. But some, like you, exist in both simultaneously. Dreamwalkers, we call them. We, the custodians. We maintain the boundaries. The figure's head tilted again. But you're making our job difficult. Alex woke the next morning with a conversation burned into memory, too vivid to dismiss as just another dream. The figure the custodian had explained that reality was not a single, solid thing, but rather multiple layers of existence that occasionally intersected. Most humans inhabited primarily what the custodian called the concrete realm, the world of physical laws and linear time. But there was another layer, the flux realm, where thought shaped reality and time folded back on itself like origami. Dreams were glimpses into this realm, brief visits during sleep when the conscious mind relaxed its grip on concrete reality. Dreamwalkers like Alex existed partially in both realms at once, which was why reality seemed to waver and transform at random intervals. The boundary between worlds was thinning around them, allowing elements from the flux realm to bleed through. "This is insane," Alex muttered, pouring coffee into a mug that, thankfully, remained just a mug. "I'm losing my mind." But even as the thought formed, a small white feather drifted down from nowhere, landing softly beside the coffee pot. The custodian had left Alex with rules survival guidelines for those who walked between worlds. First, never acknowledge the bleed-through events when they happen. Attention feeds them, makes them stronger, more persistent. Second, anchor yourself in the concrete realm through physical sensation. Pain works best a pinch, fingernails pressed into palms, cold water on the face. Third, never tell others what you see during a bleed-through. Speaking of it aloud makes it more real, weakens the boundary further. Fourth, if you find yourself unable to determine which realm you're in, look for inconsistencies in memory or environment. The flux realm cannot maintain perfect continuity. Fifth, and most important, if you encounter others like yourself, other dreamwalkers, avoid them at all costs. When dreamwalkers gather, the boundary between realms grows exponentially thinner. When the world shimmered and changed, when staircases extended impossibly upward, or streets rearranged themselves mid-step, licks would look away, dig fingernails into palms until the pain brought reality snapping back into focus. It worked, for a time. The episodes became less frequent, less intense. For nearly a week, Alex began to hope that whatever strange condition had taken hold was receding. Then came the morning when Alex entered the local cafe and saw her. She sat alone at a corner table, a woman about Alex's age, with dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She was unremarkable in every way except for one. She was looking directly at the ceiling, where a school of tiny luminous fish swam through the air as if it were water. No one else in the crowded cafe seemed to notice the impossible aquatic display. No one except the woman, whose expression held the same mixture of wonder and fear that Alex had felt during countless bleed-through events. Another dreamwalker. The fifth rule echoed in Alex's mind. Avoid others like yourself at all costs. But even as Alex turned to leave, the woman's gaze shifted, locking with Alex's across the room. Her eyes widened in recognition, not of Alex personally, but of what Alex was. Someone who could see what she saw. Before Alex could retreat, she was on her feet, moving quickly through the crowd. "Wait," she called, her voice cutting through the cafe's ambient noise. "Please, you see them too, don't you?" Alex should have left. Should have walked away without a word, following the custodian's warning. But there was something in her desperate loneliness that resonated with Alex's own experience that made it impossible to turn away. "I'm Elisa," she said when she reached Alex, her voice low and urgent. "And you're like me? You see things that can't possibly be there." They found a quiet park bench, far from crowds, where they could talk. Eliza's experiences mirrored Alex's own reality that wavered and transformed. Dreams that felt more real than waking life. The growing inability to tell which was which. It started after an accident, she explained. I was in a coma for 3 days. When I woke up, the world was different. Permeable, somehow. Have you ever been visited? Alex asked carefully. By something calling itself a custodian. Eliza's sharpened. Every night, as dusk slips into darkness, you check the window. You never used to. You used to fall asleep with the curtains open, letting the moonlight wash over your room. But that was before the paralysis began. Before the shadows started watching. It started with a dream, a nightmare. Really. You woke unable to move, frozen to your mattress. The room was silent, except for your shallow, rapid breaths. Your eyes, the only part of you that would obey, flicked to the window. There, just beyond the glass, stood a shadow, tall, thin, featureless, not quite human, not quite mist. Its head was cocked, as if curious. It was watching you. You tried to scream, to thrash, to look away, but you could only stare as the shadow pressed its hand to the glass, the outline of long, spidery fingers spreading across the pane. When you finally broke free, heart pounding, the window was empty, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The next night, it returned. This time, it was closer. Its face, if you could call it that, hovered inches from the glass. Black eyes fixed on you, mouth a gaping, silent void. You realized, with a cold certainty, that it moved closer each time you saw it during paralysis. You tried everything. You slept with the light on. You moved your bed. You even tried switching rooms. But always, the paralysis found you, and so did the watcher. It was only when you pulled the curtains shut, sealing off the night, that you slept dreamlessly. No paralysis, no shadow. But sometimes, you forget. Sometimes, you leave the curtains open just a crack, or the wind blows them apart, and then, in the grip of paralysis, you see it again, closer than before, almost inside. You know, deep down, that if the shadow ever gets through the window, if you ever see it inside the room, there will be no waking up. So now, every night, you check and double-check the curtains. You make sure they're drawn tight. No gaps, no slivers of moonlight, because you know the watcher is waiting just outside the glass, and you know it's patient. You only have to forget once. It started as a comforter porcelain doll, old but beautiful, with painted blue eyes and a faded pink dress, a relic from your grandmother's attic, placed on your shelf to watch over you. She said at first, it was just a feeling, the sense of being observed as you drifted off to sleep, the way the doll's gaze seemed to follow you in the dark. Then, the rules began. The first night, a whisper in your ear as you lay half awake. Don't leave your feet uncovered. The cold isn't safe. You obeyed, tucking your feet beneath the blanket, and nothing happened. The second night, a new rule. Don't let your hands dangle off the bed. Shadows like to hold on. You pulled your hands close, heart pounding, and the doll's smile looked a little wider in the moonlight. Each night, the rules multiplied, each one stranger and darker than the last. Don't look out the window after midnight. If you see your reflection move, it isn't you. Don't speak when the house creaks. Something is listening. Don't close your eyes for too long. If you do, I can't keep you safe. The doll's voice grew sharper, less kind. You began to dread the coming of night, dreading the next rule, the next demand. Soon, the rules became impossible, contradictory. Don't sleep, but don't stay awake. Don't breathe too loud, but don't stop breathing. Don't think about leaving me, ever. You tried to hide the doll. You locked her in a drawer, buried her at the back of your closet, But every night, she returned to her shelf, watching, waiting, her blue eyes unblinking. One night, exhausted and desperate, you broke a rule. You left your feet uncovered, just for a moment. The room grew cold, freezing, and from beneath the bed came a whisper. Not the dolls, but something else. "Thank you for letting me in." You woke with frost on your toes. The doll perched on your chest, her painted smile cracked, her eyes now impossibly wide. She whispered, "There are more rules. Now, you'll never remember them all." And as sleep claimed you, you realized the doll wasn't there to protect you. She was there to keep you afraid, to keep you obedient, to keep you hers. Each night, the rules grow longer, more twisted, and you know, as long as you listen, as long as you obey, the doll will watch, and if you ever forget, even once, she'll do more than just watch. Have you ever received a message that feels older than the internet itself? A letter that spreads like a rumor, lingering in inboxes passed from hand to hand, voice to voice, as if it's always searching for someone new. They say the whisper chain began long ago, before screens and keyboards, when words traveled on paper, folded and creased, tucked under pillows, or slipped through cracks in doors. Now, it arrives in the dark hours, when the world is quiet, and sleep is just beginning to pull you under. The rules are simple. Read the letter before midnight. Do not speak of it aloud. Share it with 7 others before you sleep. And, above all, never break the chain. The message promises protection. It claims that so long as you obey, the nightmares will not find you. The paralysis will not come. You will sleep soundly, and the shadows will pass you by. But if you break the chain, if you fail to send the letter on, the protection ends. It begins with a whisper, a gentle voice, barely there, curling around your dreams. At first, it's harmless, a single word, repeated over and over, soft as a lullaby. But each night you ignore the letter, the whisper grows louder. It slips into your ears, your mind, your bones. Soon you wake in the darkness, unable to move. The room is heavy, the air thick with dread. You sense something standing at the foot of your bed, watching, waiting. The whisper becomes a hiss, a warning, a threat. Some say they see a shape in the corner, a figure made of shadows and old regrets. It leans close, its breath cold against your cheek, and murmurs the words you failed to share. Others claim the whisper follows them into the day, echoing in empty rooms, flickering in the corners of their eyes. A reminder that the chain is not broken, only waiting. There are stories of those who tried to destroy the letter, to silence the voice. They say the whispers never left, not truly. So, when the whisper chain finds you, when you read its careful instructions, remember the rules. Read before midnight. Never speak of it aloud. Share it with 7 others. And never, ever break the chain. For the whisper is patient, and it always finds its way back. Late at night, in the quiet of their own homes, a group of online friends gathered in a private chat room, unaware that they were about to become part of a story they couldn't escape. It began like any other night. A group of 6 friends, all from different corners of the world, connected via their shared interest in folklore and mystery. They'd spent hours swapping stories, discussing obscure legends, and diving deep into the eerie unknown. But tonight, something was different. One of them, Sarah, posted a message that sent a chill through the group. I don't know what's happening, but I think I'm being followed. It wasn't a usual joke or a creepy anecdote she'd share. The tone was unsettlingly serious. Sarah had always been the skeptic, the one who dismissed even the most terrifying stories as pure fiction. So, when she shared this, it made the others pause. "What do you mean, followed?" asked Jake, always the practical one. "It's probably just your mind playing tricks on you," but Sarah insisted. She described feeling like something was watching her whenever she was alone. shadows moving just out of the corner of her eye, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. At first, it seemed like a prank, but then, the others began to notice strange things happening to Dot. Jake reported hearing faint whispers late at night, too quiet to be real, but loud enough to unsettle him. Amanda, who lived in the middle of nowhere, claimed she felt something cold brush past her while she was reading. She thought it was the wind, but the air had been still. And then, things grew darker. A message appeared in their group chat late one evening. It was from an unknown number, one they didn't recognize. The message was simple, almost too simple, and it chilled them to their core. You are being watched. You must follow the rules. If you don't, the consequences will be severe. None of them had any idea who it was from or how they'd gotten their numbers. But soon, the rules began to surface. Sarah was the first to share the message, clearly shaken. I've been told not to talk about it, ever. They all fell silent, confused, and unnerved. But soon, more of them started receiving similar messages, each one slightly different, but all bearing the same warning. Follow the rules, or something would come after them. The rules were clear, yet perplexing. Never speak of the whispers. Always listen when the whispers come. Keep the door locked at night, no matter what. Do not respond to the entity's call. They all wondered if it was a cruel joke, but the deeper they looked into it, the more they realized they were all being haunted by the same thing, bound by the same invisible force. No matter where they lived, no matter how far apart they were, the whispers were following them, the rules becoming more oppressive by the day. Amanda, the quiet one, had started locking all the windows, placing salt across her doorway in the desperate hope that something would stop the entity from entering. But it only seemed to get worse. One by one, they all began to feel the same pull, the same strange need to comply. Even the most rational of them couldn't resist. They found themselves following the rules, believing the warnings. Jake started pacing in his apartment, waiting for the whispers to come again. Sarah spent her nights staring at the ceiling, trying not to hear the voices. But the most chilling part was when they realized something: they were no longer alone. The whispers began to overlap, voices intermingling with each other. Sometimes, they would hear a voice they didn't recognize, but it was always there, just on the edge of hearing. And they began to ask themselves the most terrifying question of all: was this really happening? Or had they all gone mad? By now, the lines between reality and the unknown were blurring. It wasn't just the whispers anymore. It was the rules, the constant fear, and the unshakable feeling that they were being watched, monitored by something far older than they could comprehend. One night, Sarah finally broke. She shared something in the group chat that no one expected: a video of herself, holding her phone out in front of her. In the background, faintly, a figure could be seen standing at the edge of her room, just outside the camera's reach. She typed, "It's here. I don't know what to do. It's real." The others had no answers, no way to save her. They could only watch as Sarah's messages grew more frantic, each one pleading for someone, anyone, to help. But the entity's grip was tightening, and then, as quickly as it had begun, Sarah vanished. Her messages stopped. Her video disappeared. All that remained were the empty, haunting rules she had shared. The echo of her last desperate cry. The group was left, broken and terrified. But soon, they began to realize that they too were trapped in the same twisted web. Each of them had received the same warning. And now, it was their turn to face the consequences. As the final days of the month passed, the whispers became louder, the rules more urgent. The line between the living and the dead blurred further, and one by one, each friend felt the pull of the entity, and as they followed the rules, they too were slowly becoming part of something far greater than they could ever imagine. The Whisper Network was growing, and now it was their turn to carry the burden, and so they followed the rules. But the question lingered in the dark corners of their minds. Who would they become next? What would you do if, in the dead of night, the walls themselves began to speak? Not with comfort, but with warnings, soft, urgent, impossible to ignore. And what if, in your most helpless moments, you realized those whispers were all that stood between you and something waiting just out of sight? In a quiet suburb, where the houses pressed close together and the streetlights flickered at dusk, lived Margaret. She was a woman of habit: early to bed, early to rise. Her life measured in gentle routines, but sleep had never come easy. For as long as she could remember, Margaret had suffered from sleep paralysis. She would wake frozen, unable to move or cry out, her mind trapped between dream and waking. Sometimes, she sensed a presence in the room, a heaviness in the air, but she told herself it was only her mind playing tricks in the darkness. One night, as autumn rain tapped at the windows and the wind moaned through the eaves, Margaret awoke to the familiar weight pressing her into the mattress. She tried to move, to speak, but her body would not obey. Her breath came shallow, her eyes wide. The room was silent, save for the soft ticking of the clock. Then, from the wall beside her bed, a whisper rose. It was faint at first, barely more than a sigh, but it grew clearer, threading through the silence. "Don't look at the door." Margaret's heart hammered in her chest. The voice was not her own. It was old, tired, but insistent. She stared at the ceiling, fighting the urge to glance at the door, where the darkness seemed deeper than before. The paralysis faded with the dawn. Margaret woke, shaky but unharmed. She told herself it was a dream, nothing more. But the next night, it happened again. She woke, pinned to the bed, her limbs heavy. The wall whispered, "Closer now. Don't breathe too loudly." They listened. Margaret forced her breaths to slow, her chest aching with the effort. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement, a shadow shifting near the dresser. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for morning. Night after night, the pattern repeated each time. The wall offered a new rule. Keep your hands beneath the covers. Count to 50. Then they'll pass by. Never let them see your eyes. Margaret followed each instruction, her fear growing with every encounter. The shadows in her room thickened, gathering in corners, stretching along the floor. Sometimes, she saw shapes all thin, with faces lost to darkness, lingering just beyond the reach of the lamplight. She tried to tell herself it was only the paralysis, only her mind, but the rules felt real, necessary. One night, exhausted and desperate for rest, Margaret faltered. She broke the rule. Her hand slipped free of the blanket, fingers curling against the cool air. The wall's whisper grew frantic. "Hide your hand, quickly." But she could not move. A shadow slid across the floor, pausing by her bedside. It leaned close, its breath cold on her skin. She felt fingers brush her hand, thin, icy, searching. A voice, not the walls, hissed in her ear. "Found you." The paralysis broke with a gasp. Margaret jerked upright, her hand numb, her heart racing. A bruise bloomed on her wrist, dark and cold. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering as the first light crept into the room. From then on, Margaret obeyed every whisper. She listened to the wall, memorizing each rule. Do not speak, do not move. Wait until the clock chimes twice. Some nights, the rules changed, shifting with the shadows. She never knew what would be asked of her until the moment arrived. The shadow people grew bolder. They pressed closer, their forms clearer. Sometimes they whispered among themselves, voices like dry leaves. Sometimes they reached for her, their hands inches from her face. But as long as Margaret followed the rules, they could not touch her. Her days became haunted by the memory of the night. She grew quiet, withdrawn, her eyes shadowed with fear. No one believed her stories. No one else heard the wall. But every night, as paralysis took hold, the wall whispered its warnings, and Margaret listened, breathless, clinging to each word, for she knew, now, what waited in the darkness. She knew the price of breaking the rules, and somewhere, in another silent room, someone else wakes to the weight of their own body, listening for the first whisper from the wall and wondering how close the shadows have already come. What if the voice that warns you in the night is not your own? What if, as you lie frozen in the darkness, unable to move or speak, something beneath the sheets leans close to your ear and tells you how to survive until the morning? Some say these whispers are a blessing, others a curse, but all agree. No one ever forgets the rules whispered beneath the sheets, in a quiet house on the edge of town, where the trees pressed close against the windows and the wind sounded like distant voices. A teenager named Jamie began to dread the coming of night. The days were ordinary, filled with the dull routines of school and chores. But the nights brought something else, something that waited in the shadows. Just out of sight, it began with a heaviness, a slow sinking feeling that started in Jamie's chest and spread through every limb. The bed would feel impossibly soft, as if it wanted to swallow him whole. Jamie would stare at the ceiling, heart pounding, unable to move a finger or cry out. The room would fill with a silence so thick it felt alive, pressing down with invisible hands. Locals say sleep paralysis is just a trick of the mind, a harmless glitch between waking and dreaming. But Jamie knew better. On the first night it happened, he had tried desperately to scream, to move, to do anything but lie there helpless. That was when the whispering began. The voice was soft, barely more than a breath, but it was clear and close. It seemed to come from inside the pillow, or perhaps from beneath the sheets themselves. "Don't open your eyes," it whispered, a warning wrapped in velvet darkness. "If you see what's here, it will see you too." Jamie obeyed, squeezing his eyes shut, fighting the urge to look. Something cold brushed against his ankle, and the urge to scream grew stronger. But the voice whispered again, gentle and insistent, "Don't move. If you move, it will know you're awake." He tried to slow his breathing, to become invisible beneath the covers. The weight on his chest grew heavier, as if something had climbed onto him, pressing him deeper into the mattress. Time stretched, each second an eternity. At last, the pressure faded. Jamie's body jerked as feeling returned, and he bolted upright, gasping for air. The room was empty, the darkness unchanged, but the warning lingered. The next morning, Jamie convinced himself it had been a dream, but the fear clung to him, following him through the day like a shadow. That night, he lay awake, afraid to sleep, afraid to listen, but sleep came anyway, dragging him down into the heavy darkness. Again, the paralysis struck. Again the voice whispered, from beneath the sheets, "Don't speak. If you make a sound, it will remember your voice." Jamie bit his tongue, swallowing the terror that threatened to spill from his lips. The silence pressed closer, thick and suffocating. He could hear something moving at the foot of the bed, slow and deliberate, as if testing the boundaries of the darkness. Some say the whispers are a guardian, a presence that knows the rules of the night. Others claim the voice is just another trick, meant to keep the dreamer trapped and afraid. Jamie did not care which was true. He clung to the voice, following its instructions with desperate faith. Each night, the rules changed. "Don't let your feet touch the floor," the whisper warned one night, as Jamie felt something cold slither across the carpet. "If it feels you, it will pull you under." He curled his toes, pressing them into the mattress, heart hammering. The feeling passed, and the room grew quiet again. Another night, the voice said, "Don't breathe too loudly. It listens for breath." Jamie held his breath, counting the seconds, waiting for the pressure to lift. Sometimes, the voice would hum softly, a lullaby that made the darkness seem less endless, less hungry, Rumors claim that those who hear the whispers beneath the sheets are marked. They walk through. The world changed, their eyes always flicking to dark corners, their steps cautious in empty rooms. Jamie became one of these, quieter, more watchful, always listening for the voice that had saved him night after night. His parents noticed the change. They asked if he was sleeping well, if something was wrong at school. Jamie shook his head, unable to explain the terror that waited in the dark, the voice that warned him what not to do. He grew pale and thin, haunted by secrets he could not share. The whispers grew more urgent as the nights passed. "Don't let it see your fear," the voice said. "If it knows you're afraid, it will never leave." Jamie tried to be brave, but the darkness seemed to grow thicker, the presence beneath the bed more restless. Sometimes he heard other voices, distant, angry, hungry, but the whisper beneath the sheets was always near, always gentle. One night, the rules changed. The voice was softer than ever, almost sad. "Tonight, you must not listen. Cover your ears. If you hear its true voice, you will never wake." Jamie obeyed, pressing his hands to his ears, blocking out the sounds of the room. He felt something moving beside him, a cold breath against his cheek, a hand brushing his hair. He squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the danger to pass. When morning came, Jamie woke to find a single gray hair on his pillow. He was only 16. Some say the whispers are the voices of those who did not survive, trapped beneath the sheets, warning others not to make the same mistakes. Others believe they are the last kindness in a world of shadows, a fragile barrier between the dreamer and the darkness. Jamie learned to live with the whispers. He memorized the rules, reciting them each night before sleep. He never let his feet touch the floor. He never opened his eyes. He never spoke, never breathed too loudly, never listened when told not to. The voice beneath the sheets became his companion, his protector, his secret. But legends whisper that the rules are always changing, that the darkness is always learning. One night, the voice might not come. One night, the dreamer might be left alone, with only the silence and the thing beneath the bed for company. As the sun set and shadows crept across the walls, Jamie lay beneath the sheets, listening for the whisper that would tell him how to survive the night. And somewhere, in the darkness, beyond the reach of his voice, something waited, patient and hungry, ready to teach a new rule to the next restless soul. You're listening to Nocturnal Narrative Studio. If these haunting stories filled you with fear, kindly share your own frightening experiences in the comments section below. Keep your eyes peeled for our upcoming episode, where we have even more fearsome and spine-tingling tales planned for you.